Hello, I'm J.R. Richardson. I'm with Bellevue University. We are in Omaha, Nebraska at the 38th Annual Nebraska-Vietnam Veterans Reunion. We're here at the Hyatt Regency in West Omaha, and I am sitting here with Richard. Today is the 12th of August, and we are here to hear a little bit about Richard's story. He has agreed to share his experience in the military and in Vietnam. Richard, can you tell me a little bit about yourself growing up, when you were born, where you were born, and a little bit about your family life?
All right. I born August 1st, 1949 in Lincoln, Nebraska. I have two brothers, mother and father, so I'm the middle child. We were working class. My mom and my dad started Elgin in Lincoln, Nebraska, and then my mother went to Goodyear, and my father ended up at the post office. Went to Northeast High School. The size of Lincoln back then was only about 59,000, and now it's over close to 300,000. But graduated from Lincoln Northeast in 1967. Got married in 68, and I got drafted. Well, I was going to get drafted when the lottery came out in 1970. Before this, though, we have 5 generations of our family that served in the military. My grandfather served in World War I. My dad and his brothers and another uncle served in World War II. I had an uncle killed at the cliffs of Dover in September 1944. Last name is long, and the VFW Post 3606 is named after him as Miller Long VFW Post. I had other uncles that served during the Korean conflict. My brother went to Vietnam as a Marine in 67, 68. He was about 10 clicks outside Way in February 68. And my cousin went in 68, 69, and I followed up in 70, 71. So 3 of us served in Vietnam. We all came back. And then my son served in the Army in the 90s, and then my cousin's children served in Afghanistan and Desert Storm, and my grandson just got out of the Navy serving on the USS Pasadena. So we have a long line of military history.
Well, I'll tell you, that's just amazing that you had that much support, I'm sure, because it's kind of in your DNA to serve your country. That's pretty cool.
Well, yeah, it was in our DNA to serve in Vietnam. There was no thought of leaving to go to Canada or anything like that. I was actually in school in 1968, and when my brother went to Vietnam in December and then was in tent, it just blew my mind. I couldn't concentrate. So they asked me to leave after the first year. But I was a volunteer draftee, and the reason I volunteered for the draft was the Marine Corps was recruiting from draftees in September, of 69. And I learned that if I volunteered for the draft and the Marine Corps said, "I want you," I could say, "No, thank you." I said, "I'll wait for my draft number." Well, I got to Vietnam in March of 1970, and my draft number was 107 for the first lottery. And my first sergeant called me in one day in April and says, "You've just been drafted." But they wouldn't let me go back home.
So after being drafted, where did you end up going to basic training?
Well, I was working at Goodyear also at the time, and I thought I was in pretty good shape. I weighed 240 pounds and went up to Omaha here for induction, and they shipped me off to Fort Polk, Louisiana, which I refer to as Fort Puke. But it was hell for me, because went in at 240, and in 8 weeks I was down to 160. So I was extremely weak, but it did prepare me. It's called Little Vietnam Fort Polk. So it prepared me quite a bit about the mental aspect. So, and then I went to Fort Leonard Wood for combat engineer training, and had extended time there because I had some problems with my knees in AIT. So I was there a couple weeks longer than the class I was with. So, but the neat thing was on March 10th, that was my DEROS date, no, not my DEROS, my date to go to Vietnam, and I was at the air base in California, and here comes one of the guys I went to basic in AIT with. He had spent 2 weeks at some base before he had to go to Vietnam. So my brother Dale Dimmer, lives. He was from Farley, Iowa, where Fields of Dreams was taken down, right around that area.
Yeah.
And he passed about 9 years ago. But we got to the same company and same squad, and we served our time together.
Oh, that's got to be pretty neat.
Yeah. There weren't too many, since I was a combat engineer, only people I knew were some of my squad. I didn't know all my squad, because we would go out in the field and build landing zones. And then just before Cambodia in April 70, and in Cambodia, they decided to make us educated grunts, because I was out in the field 58 of those 60 days. We built 2 or 3 small landing zones, but otherwise I was out in the field.
Okay, where were you stationed at in country?
In country, I began at Tay Ninh by Black Virgin Mountain, and then I was in the field building landing zones March and April. We built a ton of landing zones, and I became the demolition specialist for our squad. Then our base area moved to Bien Hoa in late April. It was before April 15th or 17th, because I had just come out of the field at Fire Support Base Atkinson, and that's where my brother was. And we had caught a lot of incidental fire while out in the field, and this place was right on the enemy's penetration route. And so they pulled me in that afternoon, and I helped my squad put up 1 row of concertina wire, and then my sergeant came up to me and said, "You gotta go to the rear," because they moved from Tay Ninh to Bien Hoa. And I did everything but get court-martialed, because I said, no, I want to stay with my brother. And so my brother convinced me to go back. I left all my ammunition for my M16 with him. We had 2 squads on that base, and I understand they were assigned to 2 bunkers because it got hit that night. And I'll never forget, I was in the talk in my base area, and it came over the radio, and I just went crazy because I wanted to get there. You know, that was my brother. And so all that was in base camp at that time. We didn't know everybody's getting ready for Cambodia at that time. So my sergeant told me to go pick out 6 guys, lame, lazy, and druggies, and tell them to saddle up. And I said, they don't know what they're going to do. I was at that time more experienced than all these people, and I'd only been in country 40 days. So I remember collecting 6 REMFs, REMF. I think everybody knows what that stands for if you're in the military.
I know the MF part. What was the RE?
Rear echelon.
Gotcha.
So, and of course, they were so cooperative. And finally, I got 5 others with me, and my platoon sergeant got 5 with him, and we went out to the landing strip, and it was after 1 o'clock in the morning, so I hadn't had any sleep in 48 hours. And then it started lightly raining, and they wouldn't let us lift off. And I was just going ape shit, because the helicopters had their radios on, and they were recording, we were listening to everything going off. And I just remember that I was the first one to touch down, and on that ship I kept on telling these guys, so help me, if you shoot me, I'll kill you. And I couldn't let them lock and load, because I don't think they knew what side of the weapon to point at until we just were coming into the landing zone. And so just as we got into the landing zone, we were hovering at 5-10 feet, and the firefight had ended about an hour early while we were en route. And first thing I did is go meet my brother and a couple friends. I can't remember their names. So that was one of my first initial incidences, were coming in after the fact, but there were bodies laying all over. That was not, it wasn't pleasant, put it that way.
I can imagine it was stressful, especially since there's somebody you care about that goes beyond just your fellow man. It's somebody that you consider a brother. Well, when I came home, the first thing I told my wife when I came home, I says, I'll never love you as much as I love Dale Dimmer, because there's just a certain bond in war that is thicker than anything. It's amazing. So, were there any other additional firefights that you ended up being in?
Well, I have several medals. We were on the second flight into Cambodia on May 1st, 1970. I was a combat engineer. I believe we left out of Song Bay because that was as far north as I'd ever been in Vietnam, because we were down in the Central Highlands to the south. And I remember being on the second ship, and as we were coming in, they yelling, "Get ready, it's a hot LZ." And we came up over the hill, and to me, it reminded me of the Sound of Music as she's coming up over it. All virgin grass, just beautiful, fields of fire of 200 to 300 meters. And they said, we're coming in a hot LZ. So we landed there, and my squad and I were responsible for opening an airstrip. So we, PSP was the metal landing material that we had to put down, and we got there probably mid-morning, 10, 11 o'clock, and by 9 o'clock that night, my squad was working on the PSP. The other squads and other companies were clearing the actual landing zone and putting them concertina, but we had enough PSP laid that a Caribou could land on that night to resupply. And then the next morning we got up and we extended it, and by that afternoon we were having C-130s come in. So they told us to get a good night's sleep, and the next day we were gone. My squad was gone. We were out in the field. So then that's when we started going out with the grunts, and that's when the shit started hitting the fan. But two incidences in Cambodia, which are very significant to me. There was Rock Island East cache they found, and another unit, I believe it was the 1st Cav, 1st to the 7th, found Salty's cache. And don't ask me where it was, but I just came out of the field and with the grunts, and I was going to have a couple days at the small landing zone. Platoon sergeant says, "Get your shit and come with me." So got me a pack, and all of a sudden he had wrapping a rope between my legs, and they said put a C-clamp, which is a metal C-clamp like that. They said get on this helicopter. And so they got me on a helicopter and took me up 100 feet on that LZ and said, get down that rope. And they kept on saying, make sure that your head is below the skid before you kick off. Because if you didn't, we were the pioneers for air assault. Everything that's done by air assault, we did in the field live. But so I got me up 100 feet, got my head below that, and came down the rope. And the sergeant was down there. He landed a chopper and says, "You're ready." So a chopper took off with him and 3 guys, and then the second came back and picked me up. Well, him and 3 other guys. And they took us to this landing zone. I'll never forget that it was triple canopy jungle, 300 feet up, and there was a clearing maybe 20 by 20. And they said, "You're going down there." And the pilot said, "Now remember, if you're halfway down, or if you're down and you start receiving fire, hang on, we'll pull you out." And my platoon sergeant said, I was the next to last, he was the last one, he said, "You get shot at, you just get down to the bottom as fast as you can." So someplace in there, I guess there was a couple shots taken at me when I was about halfway through down. And so you could break yourself with your hands and gloves, and got down there real fast, but my sergeant got down there right between my legs after I rolled out of the way. And he just let the rope and the copter go on up. So that was my introduction to, it was the neatest thing, probably one of the neatest things I did. It was to rappel in, because there's only 6 of us that did it. And I've seen a picture of one of my squad members that they took by somebody, but it was at that location, but it wasn't me. So, and it's not, and we were combat engineers, so we were not known by the grunts. So, but we cut a large LZ, an L-shaped LZ there, because there was the largest rice cache and brand new boxes of SKSs and AKs still in the Vaseline. So they were hauling all that out. But a couple things happened there that I do not want to go into. That's when I figured somebody's trying to kill me. I went through a lot of incoming, and after a couple of weeks, I started sleeping through incoming unless it was within 100 meters, because we were getting shelled that often in some of these LZs we were on. But then another thing, the best thing that I did in Cambodia, and you cannot find it anywhere. I've contacted archives, I contacted the 1st Cav Division, and they have daily sit reps. Well, I'd come in from the field again, and I was a US, not a RA, and I was the only one that my platoon sergeant requested to go on special missions with as a US, and I was his demo man. So he comes to us, gets 5 of us plus him, and there's 2 helicopters there. Well, he said 1-day mission, in and out. So 5 of us load up on one helicopter, and all of a sudden the second one takes off. We didn't know where we were going, what we were doing. We don't know where I was, but we flew into a fairly open landing zone to resupply grunts, and we got off, and here was 9 43-pound cratering charges in the second helicopter. Well, the grunts wanted nothing to do with us, because they had their rucks. We all carried 90 to 150-pound rucks while we were over there. And here there was 5 of us with these 9 43-pound cratering charges that we had to haul up a mountain. So the grunts wouldn't relieve us, but the other 4 that were extra, they relieved each other, carrying it up the mountain about a mile. So we got up to the top, looked over, and there was a plateau, and looked like the craters of the moon. I mean, they must have had, arc lights must have hit that area 10, 20 times. And right
You're talking about the B-52s?
Yeah, arc light, yes. And here was this hard rock road coming across the plateau around the side of the mountain that we just came up, and it was the Ho Chi Minh Trail. So platoon sergeant came and got me. I was an E4 at that time, and we had an E5 with us, but I was his demo man. He came and got us. We walked down. Nobody wanted to walk down and help us carry the cratering charges down, but we walked down to the side of the mountain. Here was this Ho Chi Minh Trail going around the mountain. And he said, "That's our job. We're going to blow it with the cratering charges." So it was getting late. Oh, we're going to do this other day. Well, all we had was one canteen of water and no sea rations, and the grunts didn't want to help us at all. So he talked to the lieutenant, because this was a special mission, and it's nowhere in writing. And we got one case of sea rations for the 6 of us, and no water. So we had to have, a 2-quart canteen. And so we spent that night up on the mountain. Next morning, again, they were fighting with us. The grunts were fighting with us because 4 of them had to carry down cratering charges. And we had our military shovel and a couple picks. So we carried them down, and it was about 100 meters on the side of the mountain. We put 3 cratering charges in 3 rows that covered 100 meters, 30 meters apart approximately. And, I'd done a lot of demolition prior to this. So sergeant's with me, and we hooked them all up, and he cut off about a 3-minute fuse. And I'm sitting there saying, what the hell? It can't be that bad. We're going to go around the other side of the mountain. So we always tested. We cut 2 lengths of time fuse and lit one, so to give us our approximate time. So we lit that, and all of a sudden we only had 3 or 4 grunts providing escort and security for us. So we light that. He sent the rest of the squad back. We had 1 or 2 grunts with us, the platoon sergeant and I, and he lit it, and he said, "Let's go, take off running." So we took off running, and it was very well, where the top of the mountain to the plateau must have been about only 50 meters, just right in there. And so we hustle up that, and he's up there, and the grunts are all standing around looking. He's yelling at everybody, "Get in cover, get in cover." And shit, we're 50 meters away, 100 meters away with a 50-foot mountain in front of us. And so that thing went off, and we had incoming boulders from that road. But then all the grunts wanted to go down there and see what we did, and we only allowed the 5 or 6 that provided security go with us and our squad. And we slid that thing down that mountain. And to go around that mountain, I don't know how much equipment they would have had, but it would have probably taken them 6 months to a year if they wanted to use that route, because we slid it down that mountain. That was real neat.
That is neat. It sounds basically like the craters that they were taking, those crater rounds. It sounds like those almost do what some of the munitions out of the arc light was doing, but you were able to do it right smack dab on the Ho Chi Minh Trail. Very cool. You had mentioned decorations, and we can get into that in a little bit, but was any of the decorations for that?
I believe I got 2 decorations for repellent when I was at Salty's Cache, both for Valor. And I believe I was issued a Bronze Star for that operation. It could have been for that operation or for what we did in Cambodia, gotcha. I believe.
So you mentioned a couple things there. Was that Ho Chi Minh Trail, was that in Cambodia then?
Yes, it was.
Because I know it was a little bit everywhere. Was there another mission then? that followed that one?
And it was, I believe it was before that. And again, I was out with the grunts. So and I was with First of the Seventh. And for years, I told the story and couldn't verify it. And, you know, once I got shot at, I kind of lost it. I didn't think I was coming home. Yeah. But we were out with the grunts. There was two of us. I was a demo man, and I had somebody else, I don't know who. And our goal in Cambodia was to find the radar towers, the radio towers. So, and my goal with the grunts was to provide C4 to open up a landing zone in case we took casualties, so they could get the wounded out. So I was always in the second or third squad back, and never at the front. But we came up on top of this hill, and the captain was in, and he was going crazy. You know, we got up there, and we didn't know what it was, and it was towards the evening. But we looked out to and now I know it was to the west, and here were all these towers coming out of this mountain. I mean, there had to at least be 30 to 40, maybe 50 towers. And so we found it. So he called it in, and the next chopper in was the colonel on his loach. And he was going crazy. And, you know, because that was our accomplishment. We didn't know it at the time, but that's what we were looking for. And so we were all excited, but at the same time, we were all scared because we knew we would probably get our asses kicked because it had to be highly certified. So needless to say, none of us got any sleep that night because we heard the colonel on the phone planning everything, and it was set to go. You know, we had them got us all together, and we're going to go down that mountain beginning at probably 5:36, and then they were going to toss in an arc light before that, and then they were going to open up with everything they had. And it was early morning, and you know, all of us were gung-ho because we thought we could end the war. We might be dead, but we really felt this would end the war. And all of a sudden the colonel starts screaming into the radio, and they called it off. Somebody back in the rear called off everything, and I later learned by reading books and stuff like that the colonel was just going crazy on the ground. And I understand Abrams was on the other end and had to talk to him. You will obey this order. And the reason was that hill was further than 19 and a half clicks into Cambodia. And that's all that we had permission to go in, according to Nixon, was 19 and a half clicks. And this thing was maybe 22, 21. So, you know, we were all cheering then because we knew our ass was saved. And we walked off that mountain. Where we went, I can't really tell you.
Wow. That would have had a major impact on the war, for sure.
Well, when we blew the Ho Chi Minh Trail, that had an impact, but this could have ended it. The war could have been ended any time if they would have let us continue into Cambodia and head north, because there was so much ammunition and stuff found that I had to blow a lot at Salty's Cache, and they found another one that was under a mountain. It was a cave in a mountain, and so the platoon sergeant, they asked the platoon sergeant if anybody could blow it. So he and I got on a helicopter and went to the mountain, and the whole top of the mountain was a cave, and they had just stockpiles of weapons on top of it. So
what kind of weapons did you get out of the Saltese cache?
We got SKS, B-40 rockets, some bicycles, some largest rice cache, and some AK-47 still in boxes. And I don't know how many rounds of ammunition. But that was smaller than what they called Rock Island East, which is twice that. And that, I don't know what they ever did with the top of the mountain, because we said we could blow up, but then as we were leaving, 3 guys from EOD, experts on demolition, they flew in. They had to do it. We couldn't do it. So, because a combat engineer, we just knew how to blow things up. We didn't,
you couldn't have all the fun. They had to share a little bit. All right. Any other exciting or missions that you were on prior to coming home?
Not, well, there was a couple, but they're not minor, little minor. But one thing I was proud of, that I was the demo man for about 8 months, and I had some massive explosions. But not one person was injured or killed by all my explosions. We had a new platoon sergeant come in, and I was doing everything det, cord, and time fuse, and he said, we're switching to electric. And I just told him, bullshit. Yeah, he came from Germany or someplace, and I was a Spec 4, and there's everybody that's a combat engineer is a demolition specialist.
Right.
So he said, you're going to do electronically. And I said, no, I'm not. And he said, why not? And I said, well, all the grunts had those clackers for their Claymore mines, you know. And I knew what I was doing with det, cord, and time fuse. And I just told him no. I said, I'm not doing it. If you want me to do it, I can do it my way, and I'll be glad to. So, got a little hassle, and that's about that time I went to the rear, because I didn't know it, but they told me I was the most decorated person in the unit. And my replacement on his first blast killed 2 people. And then on the second blast, he was too close, and the boulder came in and broke his leg. And he came to me again, you want to go back out there? And I said, well, can I do it my way? And he said, no. And I said, nope, I'm good. So.
Well, it shows that your way was working anyhow.
I did some, well, after Cambodia, we opened a fire support base, 11 Bravo. And I was the last combat my unit didn't know where I was, because I was out with the grunts, and I didn't know any of the grunts. And the person I was with, I really didn't know, the other engineer. But I was the last one in for the base, day 58. But anyway, we opened this landing zone, and they put in 6 105 howitzers, and one of them had a tree going over it, one of the embankments, at about a 45-degree angle. So my platoon sergeant comes to me, and my lieutenant did too. Can you blow it? And I was good. I could drop a tree any way I wanted. So looked at it, and I said, no, I can't. I said, I can't drop it. I said, we can cut it down. And the colonel was just nasty as hell. I said, why can't you drop it? I said, well, at that angle, I had to put so much on the bottom, and then I had to crawl up and put some on the top to kick it over. And at that angle and that weight, I said, no, I cannot kick it over. It'll shatter on top. And the colonel gave me an order to do it. So lieutenant was there, and I said, you heard what he said? So I put my charges on, and boy, the base came down beautiful. The top started to go about to 80 degrees and stopped. And it came right onto the howitzer and a spotting scope. So the colonel was upset with me, but I had my ass covered. So, but that, you know, there was good things. I mean, after Cambodia, I really didn't give a shit, because I thought I was going to die. So.
How long were you still in country before your tour was up?
Well, let's see. I think I spent 2.5 months in the rear. because that platoon sergeant and I that took my other one's place, we got into it quite a bit, and they decided I better be pulled into the rear because I told them I was going to shoot someone. So, so I was in the rear for the last 2.5 months of my deal. So,
And then on your way home, was there any stories there as you got ready to out process from Vietnam and head back to the States?
it was, well, when we landed, if you watch Platoon entrance at the very beginning, only thing missing was the heat and the smell. Okay, because they opened that door when I landed, and the heat and the creosote from the landing strip, just stronger and shit. And as we were walking down, there was a line of caskets off to one side, and all these other guys getting ready to go home. And first thing we heard was FNG. So now I'm getting ready to go home, and my brother and I got to go home the same day, February 7th, February 8th, 71, and all of us, the plane was full, and we recognized a bunch of us were going home on the same plane that came over on the same plane. And we, all of us were on guard. That's the only way I can say it. And they closed the doors and took off, and there was light cheer. Yes, we made it. So we're in the air about 20 minutes, and the captain comes on and says, "If you look down now, we are leaving the coast of Vietnam." And all hell broke loose at that time. They wouldn't let us take any alcohol on a plane from Vietnam, so all we had was pop and whatever snacks we had until we landed in Wake Island. And then went from Wake to Hawaii to Anchorage to back to Travis. Yes. So.
And then when you got to Travis, how was that experience?
Okay, well, this is February now, and I live in Lincoln, Nebraska. So, checked everything in. They gave me a summer dress uniform, and Dale and I said our goodbyes. Didn't know what was going on. I knew I was going to be assigned to Fort Campbell after 30-day leave. Didn't really see any. I can't remember anything going to the air base in California. I don't. There was protesters outside the gate. I knew that, but on the flight home, I went from there to Denver, and Denver was about 20 degrees. 24 hours before at 10 a.m. it was 91, 92 degrees. So my blood was real thin. Didn't have a place to stay overnight in Denver, so I stayed in the terminal. And then the next morning it was snowing like shit. And first, my original was canceled or delayed, so I went to get on another one, standby. That one was going, and we were getting ready to. Then it was delayed, and then our first one got reopened. And I'll never forget getting on that. And Denver to Omaha, I don't know how much time it took, 3 hours. But I'll never forget, I was sitting next to this businessman. And here I had my green uniform on with 3 rows of medals. And I was only I was a draftee, 18 months. And he wouldn't even talk to me. And it pissed, I think I had a disease or something. I'll never forget that. And then when I landed in Omaha, my wife and my kid was there, and I didn't see the wife, but I do remember hearing my kid yell out, "There's Daddy." And her parents were there, my parents were there, and my dad looked at the 3 rows of medal and he said, "What the hell did you do?" And I said, "I stayed alive. And I didn't want to talk about it." So because when my brother went through TET, that was hard on my mom and dad. And then when I was assigned to the cab in Cambodia, and they put little articles in the newspaper that I received my second Bronze Star, and then when I got home I had a third Bronze Star, and I don't talk about it to this day. So I do know what I got the first Bronze Star for, but the second one I could have been for the Cambodian, but I really don't know. Third one I have no idea. So, but now that was, and going home, I remember telling my wife, I said, if I'm sleeping, don't do anything. Don't touch me, don't wake me. And we were spending it at her parents' house, because that's where she lived when I was in Vietnam. And I'll never, that night, her family came over, and I remember falling asleep in the chair while my sister-in-law was talking to me, because I hadn't had any sleep in who knows how long, maybe 48, 70 hours. So the next morning, I get in the bedroom, we get in the bed, and the next morning, I warned her. I said, she jumps on me. And next thing she knew, she was against the wall, because I'd thrown her off me. Okay, and the other hardest things coming home was language. Every other word out of your mouth was F. And I remember the first Sunday, her mother fixed a great Sunday meal, had all her family over, her brother, my brother-in-law, sister-in-law, and we were sitting at the table enjoying ourselves, and my mother-in-law pipes up, says, I bet you didn't have a meal this good in Vietnam, did you, Rich? I said, no. And he said, well, how's it taste? Pretty effing good. Just lost it. And as soon as it came out of my mouth, I started apologizing. And the next hardest thing to do was learn to go bathroom inside. And if you went inside, remember to flush. Because I didn't see that for 8 months.
Those are little things that you don't think about so much, but yeah.
Well, you look at it, 1969, McDonald's, movies, air conditioning, fast cars, they took us from that and taught us to live in the mud, eat 1945 C rations, and no hot water, no flushing stools, and the water over there was where you could get it. So that's amazing what they did in actually basic training in 8 weeks. And those of it, it's one thing that today's generation would not even come close to handling.
So that dinner coming home, was there any specific thing meal-wise that you missed the most while you were in Vietnam? Mom's spaghetti, Dad's, pancakes on Saturday morning, or anything specific?
Well, I was married, and had a kid, and we were surviving, but that was about, my wife and I was 19. Yeah, so what I missed, well, that was the first Christmas away from home, first birthday away from home. What I missed was my grandmother's cooking. My grandmother made those big fluffy rolls, and always made me a lemon meringue, a banana cream pie, and that's what she made me my first time home. But other than that, the hot water, the flushing stools, the privacy, that was all strange.
So how did your experience benefit you after when you transitioned and you looked for what do you do now?
I'm retired now. What it did for me is Vietnam taught me and every veteran, you could give us anything, $1 million piece of equipment, $10 million piece of equipment, and teach us how to do it, and we would do it. It got your mind, it's got my mind where saying failure is not an option. Just trust me, I can do it. And that was the hardest transition into civilian life because, oh, you're still a 20-year-old, you still don't have any experience. Hell, I blew up half of Vietnam. You know, how many lives did I save? And shit like this. And say, you know, life and death is the most important thing anybody can have. We had control of who lived and who died. And it did not transform into civilian life. But it did set me straight because I wanted to go back to college. And I remember going in at the University of Nebraska and talking to the Dean of Admissions, said, you're not coming back in. And they didn't want me to come back in with my 1.02 grade average or something like that. And I told them I was on the GI Bill and I had to go. So the Dean of Admissions just gave me, did not want me to come back to school. He said, you got 3 semesters to bring your grade average to 2.0. You're on probation, academic probation. So I took 3 hours second summer session and 12 hours first semester. And after that first semester, my grade point average was 2.02. So he called me back in and I said, what the hell was wrong with you? And I said, it was called Vietnam. And we all knew we were going. We didn't know if we were going to live or die. So, and when my brother was over there during Tet, you know, I was glued to Walter Cronkite, and so were my parents. So that really blew my mind. You know, and then when I was over, I just survived what you could do.
Is there anything we missed?
Well, again, I graduated from the university in '75 with a BS in business administration. Then I went to 5 years of federal law enforcement, and I did a year and a half of internal audit and 3 years of criminal territory. And I didn't know at the time, but the reason I left was because of PTSD. Because I was fighting everybody, everything, fighting my wife, just couldn't get control, you know, mind control. I didn't know what it was. But I quit, and then I went back to start all over in the post office. Wasn't satisfied, so I got my Series 6 securities license, insurance license, and then in '86 I passed the enrolled agents exam, which means I was a tax attorney, equivalent to a tax attorney, and I could practice tax law any place in the United States. And then in '92 I had to give that up because I became postmaster at Beatrice. And once you went into management, there was a thing in federal government, you cannot represent anybody for a claim against the federal government. But then Vietnam caught up with me again. 1983 is when I came home mentally. It's the first time from Vietnam, and that was rough. And then in 2004, prostate cancer, and luckily I was in my 32nd year of working for the federal government and turning 55. I wanted to work 5 more years, but I couldn't do it because I had that prostate removed and mentally fighting that, and fighting the gotcha system that all large businesses got into. I just couldn't put up with, so I retired. So.
What do you do to stay active with your buddies and your community?
Well, since I had a second child, and then in 1980 when I left the Postal Inspection Service, I was in Topeka, Kansas. My youngest son played soccer there. Well, when we came back in 1980 to Lincoln, Nebraska, soccer was just getting started. So I became one of the first soccer coaches. And several of the kids I am still in contact with because of that deal. My son went on to play soccer, and at high school he was the first. There was 2 4-year lettermen at Lincoln Southeast. They were the first 2 to get all 4 years lettering in soccer. And then I got divorced, got remarried, and my son was only 7 or 8, and he went into bowling. So I started coaching youth bowling for years. Then when my son got in high school, they had a high school club, so I helped a high school club out with bowling. And when Lincoln North Star opened, I became the first high school bowling coach at Lincoln North Star. And we got the first 2 trophies in the trophy case by winning districts. So since then, just helping people out any way we can.
All right, so let's, it sounds like we covered just about everything. I'd like you, if you would, people that view yours, they view them for research, they view them to find out what Grandpa did. If you could leave that last message, kind of inspiration to that next generation, or words of wisdom, the pearls of wisdom from Grandpa, what would that be?
I've taught all my kids is 100% of the time you fail when you quit. And if you're young, my grandchildren just graduated from college, both with honors, 2 years, the oldest 2 years ago. I've got all my family went on to higher education, and they have their degrees. And I always tell them all to go for your dream. Don't quit. You're young. Go for your dream when you're young, and the only way you fail is if you quit. That would be to anybody out there. You have a dream, go for it if you're young. What do you got to lose? So you fail. You'll fail more than once in your life.
Well, that's very good wisdom, and it matters to get back up. So you learn from those failures. So my big question to you, sir, is you talked about your rappelling from the helicopter. You're a combat engineer, you didn't get that training formally. So you were trained in the field by them tying your legs together?
What they did, they had a tower within the first 3 days in Vietnam. They had a tower where it's a building with walls, so that you just have to, and you kind of rappel down it with your legs to push off.
Gotcha.
So, but no, the first time, came out of that helicopter, they all said, because there was nothing like they have now. They have arms going out with ropes going down now. Mm-hmm. So you're clear of the skid. Well, back then it was hooked up to something inside the helicopter. So when you stood on that skid and you had all your equipment on, you had to make sure your feet didn't slip and get your head below the skid, because when you kicked off, that rope came right back into the skid. I mean, I wish I could do it again. So I wish I could go on combat assault style helicopter rides again, because that's something that, I'm proud of that. I had over 33 combat assaults with the first cav as a combat engineer. Always, sometimes first insertion, because we had to blow a zone for insertion, and other times second insertion so we could get started on the LZ.
Well, it's still not the way they train them now, I know that, because that's very little training for such a dangerous operation.
Well, see, that's another hard spot, because they now have a combat action badge. I could not get a CIB, combat infantryman badge, because I was a combat engineer, 12 Bravo. You had to be 11 Bravo. That's number one piss off. Number too pissed off is they now have the air assault medal. And we did it. You know, what the 8th engineers did in Vietnam, was never done before. And everything developed after was based on that 1st Cav Division and what we did.
Right.
And see, they only go back to 2001 on those 2 awards. So, but, yeah, I'd do it again if they'd let us win.
Yeah.
So.
Very incredible story, sir. So thank you very much for sharing with us, and we are so very glad that you did.
Oh, well, thank you. I hope I can get this down for history.
You got it.
So.
We have done that.
All right.